For today's part of the lesson, we are going to do a little bit of a review from our reading, yet understanding Greek myths. You read this part yesterday for creation and the gods. I would like you to think about what were the two types of myths in Greek culture and what can we learn from them? Well, let's reread this first paragraph. There were two main types of Greek myths, creation myths and morality myths. You just read about moral and immoral right before you watched this video. So let's apply that learning here. There were two main types of Greek myths, creation myths and morality myths. Creation myths describe how the world, landscape, plants, animals, and even people came to be. Morality myths explain how people should behave and what could happen to them if they do otherwise. The next part that I would like to discuss is a word you discussed yesterday and read, quest. Quest is a search or a journey. And when we continue to read in this next paragraph, it tells us more about quest. So let's look in this second paragraph and let's see if we can figure it out. One of the most common themes in Greek myths was the hero's quest. The hero must go on a journey and face terrible dangers along the way. Mythical heroes include Heracles, Perseus, and Jason. So in this text, it says that the hero goes on a journey but is trying to solve a problem along the way. The heroes will go on a quest to help people or solve a problem. It's important that we remember that as we move forward into Module 4. I would also like you to pause the video and answer in OneNote where it says, what are the two types of myths in Greek culture? You can pause it now. We are now going to continue with our lesson on examining evidence in a paragraph. You will notice that I have your workbook page here on the video since you don't have the workbook at home. And we're going to discuss why is evidence in explanatory writing important? Well, you're going to be gathering your own evidence about myths in order to write an explanatory paragraph about Greek mythology. And we'll be doing that in future lessons, not today. But I'm sure you remember this from earlier in the year. If I'm taking the time to explain something today, it means that you will be doing it in the future. So we're going to examine two paragraphs to determine which one uses evidence most effectively. In other words, which one does it best. So let's take a look at evidence paragraph 1. I'd like you to follow along as I read it out loud. A myth is a story that is told over and over and explains why something is the way it is. The ancient Greeks had many myths they shared about all the gods they believed in. The ancient Greeks created myths to teach people why natural events happened and to tell their people how to behave. Myths help us understand what the ancient Greeks believed long ago. Their myths were told over and over to spread their beliefs and to shape how people behaved. So I would like to think about what evidence did they use in this paragraph 1, and I am going to underline it. You will see it here. I've underlined a few sentences that remind me that they're told over and over. I underline another sentence here as well that talks about how they shared about all the gods they believed in, to teach people why natural events happen, and to teach people how to behave. That's all for paragraph 1. And this is the evidence that we found. So now let's read paragraph 2, and then we're going to look at some evidence there. A myth is a story that is told over and over and explains why something is the way it is. The ancient Greeks had many myths they shared about all the gods they believed in. The ancient Greeks created myths to teach people why natural events happen and to tell their people how to behave. Creation myths explain everything in nature. The myth about Demeter explains why we have seasons. Demeter was sad when her daughter was stolen away by Hades to the underworld. Because she was sad, Demeter stopped caring for the crops, and they died. This explained winter. Greeks had morality myths too, which taught people how to behave. For example, the myth about Arachne explains someone who is boastful and disrespectful will be punished. Arachne disrespected the goddess Athena and was turned into a spider as punishment. This myth explains what will happen if you behave badly and explains why there are spiders in the world. Myths help us understand what the ancient Greeks believed long ago. Their myths were told over and over to spread their beliefs and shape how people behaved. So let's take a look at some of the evidence that was in paragraph 2. And I've underlined that here as well. You can see that some of them are the same from paragraph 1 about how the story is told over and over again, and it teaches people about why natural events happen. But then it goes on to tell us a little bit more. It talks about creation myths, and then it even gives us an example of a creation myth about Demeter, which we'll be reading later. Then it also tells us how it explained winter. They give us another example about morality myths, and then they give us the myth Arachne, and they tell us more about Arachne as well by saying that it was someone who was boastful and disrespectful will be punished. And it explains why there are spiders in the world. I hope you notice that with the use of evidence in these 2 paragraphs, that the first paragraph has some facts, but the writer didn't give examples. In the second paragraph, the writer did give evidence and even supported the facts with facts. It gives more evidence in the second paragraph, and it also gives us more information. At this time, I want you to think about, why do you think evidence is important in explanatory writing? Well, first, as a writer, you have to back up your writer with evidence. I usually say you have to prove what you're saying. You have to give an example. Otherwise, people might think you're making something up. Also, evidence helps explain the point that you're trying to make. And lastly, when we focused on opinion writing before, we use text evidence to explain our thinking. So if we are doing explanatory writing, we need to explain our thinking as well. That is the end of this video, and you will notice that there is one question that you need to answer on your OneNote about the end of examining evidence.